So yeah, I'm thinking we can start this off by you just giving us a little bit about what is Open Hearts United. What inspires you to create behind that, and what's it all about?
Sure. So Open Hearts United is a YouTube channel that I created because I felt in my life I wanted to talk and share a lot about deep spirituality, especially combining that with psychedelics. And I didn't have anyone in my immediate life to have that connection with.
Mm,
So I thought it would be nice to at least share all of that online. And luckily, over time, it's built a bit of a community. So there's a lot of people to engage with. The name itself, Open Hearts United, sort of implies it's not about me. It's about a bigger picture of just people that feel like they want to do good in the world. And hopefully we can come together and sort of help each other out on the spiritual path and maybe go a little bit deeper.
cool.
That's the basic intro.
I like it. So it's the basis seems to be creating a community of not only opening your heart but opening others' hearts as well, and you just kind of reflect back and forth.
Yes, that's exactly it. And I guess the spin or the niche that my particular channel focuses on is psychedelics, because that's something that's mostly not done with a serious sort of meditative approach, I
Yeah.
find, at least in my own life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the little corner of the internet that I think this community enjoys talking about, is how can we actually use these substances for at least experiencing enlightenment and moving our hearts closer to that, or at least removing all the baggage that we carry so that it's more easily accessible to us on a daily level.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's
I,
go down
I
that route.
I know you're the interviewer, but I might have a bad habit of asking you too many questions. May I ask what is your level of interest in psychedelics?
It's a high level of interest, to say the least. The thing is, though, I haven't partaken in a psychedelic experience in probably well over a year now, but I still revere and regard the experience as something very important to my entire life. It's something that I can't just simply forget and just say it was just another experience, or it was just another thing that happened in my life. I think it's something that I'll forever have ingrained in my being. So yeah, to say it's important is really it's really it's not even doing it justice, to be honest. I feel like as though it's like almost a part of my being, like what happened when there was a few times, but I guess to culminate it into one time, what happened when I took high doses of psilocybin mushrooms, it really transformed me into a more loving being. I guess it opened my heart, in a way. It allowed me to really feel what love really is, man. It extended more than just me getting high and seeing some visuals, as many like to do it for. It was really just an invigoration of my heart, it seemed. And I can't just, that's not something I ever will forget, and that's not something I'll ever disregard. So with that, I forever revere psychedelics and the psychedelic experience. And to be honest, man, I don't think I'm ever gonna have. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the future holds, but I don't feel as though at this point in my life, in this moment that I'm speaking with you, that I ever have to do it again. I don't feel like I ever have. Like, when you get the message, hang up the phone, as Alan Watts says. I feel like I got the message. Maybe the phone will ring again in the future, but at this point in time, I don't feel as though I need to tap in with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's the beauty about a lot of psychedelic experiences is it just almost feels like a single moment transforms your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And that message of love, as abstract as that sounds, it really carries forward with someone their whole life. It
Yeah.
definitely did for me as well. And it's interesting. Magic mushrooms in particular. Yeah, I shouldn't ask you too many questions, but I always find the messages are so interesting and so visual, and it's like the psychedelic nails the or hits the nail on the head with a hammer. Like it tells you exactly what you need to know for your heart to open up,
Yeah.
and then that can give you fuel to just live your whole life in a brand new way
Mm-hmm.
for the next 50 years, like you said, and there's no need to go back to it, which is a common misconception because a lot of people, if you just chat to them casually, they will mention that it's fine that we experience these things, but how do we, sort of get something permanent from it? But it's actually very natural. If you just let the experience unfold, see the love, it's impossible to forget it, and it's impossible to go back to an unconscious perspective, to play a little pun game. You just have to be more conscious. You have to remember that that's the meaning of life. As abstract as that sounds, again, it's love.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And people have definitely, if they're avid listeners of my podcast, have heard that before. I've said it plenty of times, but you can't say it enough. I really can't reiterate that enough to anyone listening and myself. It really is about love. And like you said, man, when you take a psychedelic, whatever it is, in whatever form that it comes to you, that's what it does. It nails that into your being, and in that moment, there's no other way to you can't hide from that love. It's like it's so evident, like we could say it now, and in a sober mind state, well, I'm sober, I don't know about you, but in a sober mind state we can we can
I
say
had a
it, right?
coffee actually, so no.
Okay, well, same, so I guess we're on the same wavelength here, but we can say it now, and you recognize it and I recognize it, and we're not in this like ecstatic state of feeling the love per se. But when you're in that state of the psychedelic state, it's so evident. It's just like it's obvious, right? It's almost like there's nothing else. There's nothing else but the love, right? It's one thing to say it, but there's another thing to truly to feel it, man.
To me, the word that comes up a lot is undeniable.
Mm.
You just cannot deny that that's sort of the basis of reality, the meaning of life. There's no room for argument. The mind can struggle if it wants, but it's just absolutely undeniable. It's as clear that as the sky is blue kind of thing.
Yeah. The essence is to bring that essence into our regular life, right? It's to embody that love and really just be the love, be the compassionate human being that I think is our nature. I believe that we are just, innately compassionate. I think just innately we are these pure beings, and we seem to grow out of that, right? Would you say like all of these psychedelics, yogic practices, meditation in general, all of this is really just a reminder, or maybe just like something to reorient ourselves back into our nature, right? It just seems like all whatever the practice or modality is, it just seems like a way to remember that.
Well, perhaps I could open a can of worms related to your question, and maybe we can kind of stumble together and go to what you're saying in an
Mm-hmm.
interesting way. You can give me your thoughts. But a topic I've been finding really interesting lately is just evolution that you hear about in science textbooks. And to me, it's kind of profound, the idea, I don't know if it's true, but that our hearts, our consciousness is awakening after this process of hundreds of millions of years of very slowly awakening through the animal. And it seems like all or a lot of this shadow that we carry around, common human problems like anger or jealousy or sadness or competition, struggling to reproduce or to survive, all these aspects of life that make it difficult to live, we've inherited from the animals. And it's like you said, because that's the interesting question, is it just our innate being to be compassionate and loving? I think yes, but it's not our animal selves. Because if you look at chimpanzees, for instance, that's our closest animal relative, in their tribes, they do understand love, like a mother chimpanzee loves her child, but they're also quite ruthless. I would say they're less loving than human beings. So that to me, it's very interesting to think about at a deep level, is that something in us, our hearts or our souls, after hundreds of millions of years of evolution, is finally remembering, like at a cosmic level, who are we? And that seems very related to love. But the way, or the reason I like to think about it in this way, awakening, is because it makes it seem very profound. Like we shouldn't stroke our own egos. But the idea that after hundreds of millions of years, or perhaps if you believe in reincarnation, I think it's true, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
After such a long time, now through meditation and through psychedelics, we're really awakening. It makes it seem very profound, like a book that's 1,000,000 pages long, and now we're really getting to the meat of it. We're
Yeah.
really remembering
Like this
who
is
we
the
are.
climax. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes it more exciting to sit down in meditation every day. Otherwise, it can be a bit mundane. But if we think about it in this big picture,
Yeah.
and it makes us question as well who we are. That's always good in meditation. I could get your opinion on that, but self-inquiry is, I think, all meditators encourage that. So feeling, if you're saying my genuine true nature is love, we can feel, well, who am I then? Because sometimes I get angry or jealous or sad. So that's not my true nature, or is it my true nature? So we can feel all these things move through us and sort of try and find, who am I? Which is a very abstract process, obviously.
Yeah, to say the least. That's the thing about this time that we're speaking in, is it's very precarious in the way that who we are is that animalistic being. You know, we have that sense of animal within us, all of us. Yet we also have that sense of I amness, if you want to call it that. That sense of just that sense of being able to question your own being, just being able to be conscious in a way. Like we have the sense of like the spiritual side, I guess you could say, and then we have the animal side. And the whole path, it seems to me, is a balancing between the two. It seems to be like it's not neglecting the animalistic side. It's like recognizing it and knowing that we're actually greater than that. I think it's like we had to go through that millions of years of evolution, of the strife of the animal kingdom, to develop into the physical being that we are now, so that we could be a vehicle and a vessel for that kind of spiritual being. It's all part of the plan. It's all part of the play. And now at this point, it does seem like a climax, man. It seems like the point of points, like the omega point, like something's coming together. Like there's something, like two worlds are almost colliding, even though it's really not. You know, it's not in a non-dual absolute sense. It's really not. But in a metaphorical abstract sense, it does seem like there's like two parts of our being that are coming together at this point to form
And
the human being. Go ahead.
if I could chime in as well,
Mm-hmm.
I really am enjoying what you're saying. I'm almost getting a little bit of shivers on my neck hearing all of this. It's so exciting to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess you're right. In the ultimate non-dual sense, it's another story. But having done some psychedelics, I'm sure you're open to this idea that the human mind can interface with different dimensions.
Mm.
So that's an interesting way of thinking about it. Obviously, in Hinduism, even in Christianity and Buddhism, they've got these ideas of the heavenly realms, where you might see an angel or you might see a deva, like a Hindu goddess, perhaps, in beautiful shining light. And it seems very plausible to me that that's what's happening in the human mind. That's what makes humans different from animals, is we can really interface like a portal, literally,
Yeah.
with these heavenly dimensions and bring them into our body, like you say, and let them animate us.
Mm.
And yes, through a tantric process, that's a very, very long, like you say, you have to scrub through these layers of evolution. But then that's ultimately the point, is to bring that into this body, not to neglect it as being a problem that we need to escape from.
Yeah.
Sorry to chime in there, but I thought I'd just introduce that topic. Is it something that interests you, these sort of mystical dimensions about of the gods, you could say.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because I think all of those, I mean, if you're talking about like Hindu deities like Hanuman or, Lakshmi or, whatever, there's a whole list of them. Is that what you're kind of getting at, like those stories, those
Yes,
archetypes?
and I like the Hindu gods because obviously there are other gods like the Sumerian gods or the Roman gods, which
Mm-hmm.
are perhaps not angelic. In that case, the
Yeah.
human brain can also interface with uh, other energies, some greedy, some just downright, malevolent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's safe to say 99% of Hindu deities are benevolent, divine beings. So I'll just make that small distinction. But yes, the gods you mentioned exactly, Hanuman, Lakshmi, Saraswati, some of them also seem to come from a different dimension again. For instance, like Shiva, he's maybe a bit more, a different class of being again. But, well, I think, are you familiar with I could introduce it to your viewers at least, they might not know, someone might know, of a deva. That's what the Hindus call it, which means a brightly shining one, which if you take psychedelics, it's quite common to see these beings. They are shaped a lot of times in a humanoid form, usually very beautiful, but they literally look like a golden sun.
It's
If
like
you
light.
Google this online, you can see many artist impressions.
Mm.
And it's interesting, these artistic depictions have been going back for thousands of years. And it's a very similar thing with an angel. Angels are often portrayed as having this white light
Yeah.
emitting from them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the dimension I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But it seems like you're on the same page, but it's good to introduce that to everyone.
Yeah, for sure, man. I think there's two different stories in that though, because I see those deities like Hanuman as almost archetypes within us. Like if you read enough about Hanuman, you can find out a lot of things about yourself or whatever deity that you resonate with. I think that's the beauty of these Hindu deities, is that like they're kind of pertain to whatever your being is in a way. You can kind of like resonate. I personally I resonate a lot with Hanuman, but there's some people that like Ganesha or whatever it is, man. I guess it's like whatever floats your boat. Um, but ultimately, I think they're just kind of like they're just reflections of us, how to be, a good servant, as an example of Hanuman. Um, but what I'm
I
trying to
could
say,
again,
go ahead.
I could again chime in
Yeah,
if you
please.
like. Or my understanding is these gods a lot of the times are particular chakras in action. So it's nice to hear you mentioning Hanuman because he's generally considered to be the heart
Yeah.
chakra
Mm-hmm.
in action.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've actually never heard it put like that, but makes a lot of sense. So you have that aspect, right, of these things representing something in us. But then you got into seeing these things on psychedelics. Now, would you say when you see these entities or these deities, like do you see them represented as things like Hanuman or maybe even Jesus? Do you see a personification of them in a way when you're in these ecstatic states?
Yes, I'll answer your question, but I just also want to say straight away that I might see these entities, but it's in no way because I'm special. It's because I'm doing yoga practices. And if someone takes a substance like 5-MeO malt, I'll just throw that out there. That's I suspect, a very good substance for entering this dimension. So if anyone's curious, you can also introspect and find out for yourself. But to answer your question, some deities like Kali in particular is extremely personified. It's exactly how you see her portrayed in artistic imagery. It's very animated. She engages with you. It's like being in front of a human being, basically. Other beings like Shiva, it's a deity I've worked a lot with. I've never seen a man standing in front of me. Shiva is always geometric, but somehow I know it's him. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like something looking like the Sri Yantra or pyramids or just white light. It's all much more geometric.
Yeah.
Um, so I would suggest perhaps there are layers to things. It's the same with a goddess called Durga. That's a goddess I work with a lot. Sometimes you can see her form, but that's sort of like a water in a jug. It takes the form of the jug or the cup or the teapot, but that's
Yeah,
not actually what the goddess is or the god
right.
is. There's something much deeper to it, like a vibration, I think is a good way to put it, and a particular intelligence. And in the case of Shiva, a particular benevolence. And actually, I find it interesting. Sorry if I'm throwing too much Hindu concepts out here straight away. But one reason I like the Hindu god Durga is her name means that which is beyond. So it's nice to not fixate on her because it's always beyond any thought or any idea. It's always beyond that. Um, so I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, for sure, man. I've actually never really heard anybody say that they work with deities. That's pretty profound. Like work with deities on psychedelics. Like you almost have like a relationship with these deities in a way.
Yes. And I might just continue. It's a topic I find interesting.
Please do, yeah, man.
Again, in my normal daily life, I find not a lot of people to talk about this stuff with, so I always enjoy chatting to people online.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of these deities, especially the female ones, are very fierce.
Mm,
So what they're sort of used for, well, for me at least, is to clear karma, you could say. Um, so let's say, for instance, just one random example, you can have some jealous energy in you, then these fierce energies, they sort of come and they wipe it clean. They wipe you clean with love, but they're almost like to be respectful, but still they're almost like a janitor. You let them enter your body, fill your being, but in that process they throw out all the garbage or a lot of it. But still, it's a big process. It takes a long time, but I would say it's just a visual way of removing karma.
mm,
It's very much not necessary to work with deities. In particular, something like Zen Buddhism, you're also clearing karma, but in that case, you're doing it by just sitting like a statue. And then that stillness is also just sort of throwing out all the karma that's blocking us from seeing love.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Zen Buddhists would be like, what is deities? We don't need to get involved with that. That's just more karma. Mm,
Sorry, just another thought that came up is I don't know your backstory. It would be good to quickly hear after I say the sentence, but I would suggest that Christians work with deities every Sunday. Jesus, in my mind, Jesus, I think most people would agree there was a historical figure called Jesus, but Christ is basically a deva. It's a light being. Christ is almost portrayed as this white dove.
mm-hmm.
So whenever someone says, "What would Jesus do?" sort of thing, they're saying, Jesus or Christ, white light, animate me. So maybe it sounds esoteric if you're talking about it in a Hindu context, but I would suggest Christians do that and Buddhists as well. Buddha is basically a brightly shining one. So anyone that's contemplating the Buddha is working with a deity on some level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I mean, the way is the way is the way. I mean, it doesn't really matter how you want to go about this. You can do it with Buddha, you can do it with Jesus, you can do it with Hanuman. I guess it's really, like I said, whatever floats your boat. But when it comes down to it, putting it simply, it's that yes, we do as this humanly vessel almost get the download of light from wherever you want to get it. I know there's no separation, there's no like getting it from somewhere. It's just really about becoming a loving being. To sum it up, it seems like the way is really just being about um becoming a servant in a way. That's what it seems to me, at least. This light that we can, this Christ-like light that one can witness. Well, one is ultimately supposed to witness it and then become it and embody that, right? What would Jesus do? Exactly. That's the message, is what would Jesus do? And you have to do what Jesus would do. Essentially, that's what being a Christian is, right? Maybe not in the 21st century sense, but in the true Christian sense, I see it as really just like, how do you, whether Jesus was real or not, the story of Jesus still stands. And how can you pertain your story to the story of Jesus, if you want to take the Christian sense? And that seems like the essence, in the Western way to understand that, to understand the way, is to really, purify one's being, to become Christ-like, which means really just to become a servant to all human beings. That's the essence. That seems like that's the story. If you want to put it in a kind of very abstract, it seems to be the word of our conversation in an abstract sense, but taking it down a notch back to earth, it's really just about, this may be oversimplification, right? But it's really just about being a good person. Really, it doesn't matter what story you want to listen to, or what story you want to take in, or what archetype you really want to resonate with. For me personally, it's that seeing that, I'm you, you're me, in a way, in a sense. And with that understanding, I'm going to hopefully, ideally, to the best of my ability, serve not only myself, but serve you in the way that I serve myself. That makes sense?
Oh, that makes total sense. Uh, and I like in Christianity, there's even a word for this process that you're talking about. So, like you said, the idea is to experience Christ, but then to become like that.
Yeah.
And if you do that, then the word is a saint. We've had many saints, allegedly,
Yeah.
throughout history. And yeah, it's such a similar concept as becoming a Buddha. It's so similar.
Yeah. The way is the way, man.
There's a lot of stories, and Christianity is interesting as well. Maybe you can even call it funny, how there's at some point Christianity divided into so many sects, and everyone's talking about, Orthodoxy and Catholicism and Protestantism and baptism and Angelicism. It kind of split into 1,000 pieces. And then there's Buddhism way over to the east. But the core of it, once you go deeper, those things are just fluff. The core of it is always the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. Yeah, so let's go down this route, right? We're talking about a lot of fluff right now, right? There's a lot of fluff talk, right? Which is
Words
great.
can't do non-duality. You can't talk about non-duality. So
You can't.
What?
I know. We can try, and I try a lot with people, right? But that's what we're doing this for. I guess we're trying. We're trying to point the finger at the moon.
Yeah.
So let's try and concrete this a little bit more, if that was the right way to say it. What is this really essence of why do we do these psychedelics? Why do we do this yoga? Why do we get into this fluff? Like, what is it really all about? I think we touched upon it a little bit, but if we can simplify it, what is the way? If we can really kind of bring it back down to earth, what is this kind of way from, being, I hate to use these buzzwords, but being unawake, and then what is being awake, and how does that look to another individual? Like, how would I see you as an awakened being, as opposed to an unawakened being in your actions?
Right. Well, that's a big question. And I like the question, but I think it could be answered like an onion. I like that metaphor. Onions have many layers. So
Mm-hmm.
there's different answers for different layers. Um, the first thing that came to mind, like, why am I actually taking these psychedelics? Perhaps I'll start at the deepest level and then move out a little bit, for me at least.
Yeah, yeah.
But the selfish answer is I ultimately do want to experience enlightenment, or even you can call it liberation. I personally resonate with the Buddha's words that a lot of life is suffering, but it's possible to become, enlightenment's just a word, but to escape that wheel of karmic suffering. Sometimes we're happy. When I'm dating a girl, I'm happy, but then when we break up, I'm sad. So it seems like a just cause or a just pursuit to end that suffering permanently in a way that doesn't just kill us, that we can keep living in this world.
Yeah.
But pursuit like that, I don't take it lightly. It's a very big thing to pursue.
Yeah.
So that would be perhaps at a deeper level. But then also, I think that's something you would resonate with. To function in the world, we need some sort of an identity, a little bit at least.
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, the purpose is to become a greater and greater servant of the light. And that's actually a very important part of the journey towards the deepest enlightenment. I've mentioned it on my YouTube channel before, but the process of becoming like Christ, it is emptying ourselves, but at some point we need to let that goodness, that love animate us. So it might be a little bit more surface level. It might be a bit more dualistic to help others. But on a deeper level, what we're doing is we're just letting the love enter us and not questioning it, doing what our heart says is the right thing for us to do. And then at another layer, I think it's also important to say, because especially in the West, awakening is a big word. A lot of my friends use it as well. And I notice there's a disconnect. When I used to hear the word awakening, I would think enlightenment, like the deepest enlightenment you could imagine. But I think awakening is more subtle than that, or there are many aspects to awakening. I'll just give a quick example. I was raised in Zimbabwe without internet. And I was raised a Christian, and I was told that evolution is false. But when I discovered the internet and I got really fascinated by evolution. I thought it was really beautiful.
Yeah.
I could say I literally awakened. My eyes literally opened up to the fact that evolution is true, that it's beautiful, that our universe is so old. So that's literally an awakening, but it's not.
It's not enlightening.
I don't know if there is the awakening. There's many, many, many aspects to awakening.
Yeah.
Perhaps, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, well, I agree with you. There's many awakenings, but I think the big one, there's a big one for everybody. I don't know, from what I've experienced and from what I've observed and spoken with other people, a lot of times there's like a big one. There's a big switch in one's mind where the essence of it, if I could describe it, you kind of realize that you're not the center of the universe. You realize that there's others here with you. And not only are there others here, because we've always known that, but that you and I are connected at a level that's deeper than I knew, than I could ever imagine before this so-called awakening. And it seems to be that's the essence that I talk to a lot of people with. The so-called conscious perspective is really becoming conscious to our constant interconnectivity that we have with one another. And not only one another, with maybe inanimate objects, with animals, with nature. This sort of like, I guess that non-dual sense, that true non-dual sense that everything is really just one vibration separated into infinite layers of other vibrations. I think that's like the big switch. That's like the big awakening, if you even really want to call it that. You know what I'm talking about? Did you have like a moment where like just something switched on for you to realize that you're in this, but you're not only you're in this, you're also like you are this. You know what I mean? Like you're in this with everybody else, and everybody else is you. Was there like a moment that turned on? Was this, I could be wrong, was this like a gradual thing? Was this something that built up for you?
Yeah, I'll give my answer on that. I might just say what popped into my mind first is sort of the example you gave. And like, I gave a lot of Christian examples today. I'm not sure why. And I can't even remember the apostles' names right now. I think one of them was John. But Jesus went to some fishermen and basically performed a miracle. They caught like a whole net of fish before they couldn't catch anything. And there's obviously metaphor involved there. But the point being, the disciples or the apostles saw this miracle and they immediately sold everything. They left their whole life behind and they followed Christ. And there's another example, I think his name was Paul, who was basically a bad person. And then he was walking down a road one day, and then he became blind for a little bit. He saw white light, and he changed his life completely overnight. So that's sort of the idea that I'm getting from you, is like this life-changing, like at almost every level, you drop everything, and this is now your new commitment.
Mm-hmm.
This path of love, because it's that initial awakening. Maybe you can give me your feedback. It's life transforming at a deep level, but it takes time. It's like the starting of a journey. It's not reaching the journey.
It's the beginning.
Yeah.
Like
and something similar to that happened when I was 12, which was, that's such a long time ago. And I think people find it silly if you say something like that, like at a young age, you experience something. But all I can say is it was such a definitive switch. It felt like that's when when life sort of started, at least my heart started. My heart just started giving input, maybe. And like almost immediately overnight, I became extremely interested in deep questions about God and the afterlife and heaven, and also silly topics, because I was Christian. Everything's being framed in that way. But maybe it's just my own caution that I don't like to label an awakening as a big thing, because it seems to be a trap that I've seen in others, where people talk about awakening or enlightenment, and some people in particular, they say they've had the biggest awakening ever, but then every month they say they've had a brand new biggest awakening ever. It seems unending. There just seems to, like, if I was to portray again a layer of the onion, there is a definitive part where you really start this journey. You really want to make the world a better place. It's more important to you than money. You'd rather be working at a charity organization than working at an oil and gas company for $200,000 a year. There's like something really deep. But then I think it's just good for us to be cautionary in remembering that there's almost certainly always a deeper layer waiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you said, man, it's the beginning. It's not like the end of anything. Like this switch we're talking about, quote unquote, it's not like that's it, you made it, the game's over. If anything, the game's just starting.
Well, sometimes to me, remembering seems more an appropriate word. Like awakening is perfectly fine, but it can feel like remembering who you are, or remembering love. It's not so much that you found it for the first time. It's almost like we fell asleep and now we're again awakening, remembering something really deep. And then that puts a lot of impetus for us to actually live from the heart.
Yeah.
And sort of to add to your point, I hope I can make sense here. In Buddhism in the past, especially, they had this metaphor, basically, that most people are entirely asleep their whole life, like entirely asleep. They have no clue. But if you're extremely lucky, it's like such a slim chance. It's like a sea turtle randomly coming up for air and hitting a log that's floating on the ocean. It's like extremely rare. But if you're lucky, you'll see the footprints of an ox. That's also another Buddhist metaphor. You can somehow, if we're lucky, discover, perhaps you hear a monk talk and it strikes you like a resonance.
Yeah.
And in Buddhism, the point there is, and I think that's the moral of the story as well, that if I'm going to encourage anything, that's what I would encourage is, especially if you believe in reincarnation, it's to make the most of it. Because if we die, we're going to reincarnate. And then through the reincarnation process, we sort of fall asleep a little bit again. If we've got good karma, hopefully, I think the universe is a good place. We'll be given opportunities again to awaken. Every lifetime, it's like we need to reawaken in every lifetime. So the point is, if we're lucky enough to sort of hear this message, make the most of it. Like, take it a little bit seriously. Life is fun, but let's actually meditate. Let's actually go down this process. And to add to your point, though, this is a very old metaphor. I think it's like more than 1,000 years old. This is a culmination time again, it feels like, because maybe in the past it really was that rare to hear this message, because maybe you live in some village in Afghanistan in the mountains, you know, there's not many monks or saints walking around that are enlightened. But now through the internet, it's like if anyone really wants to, they can do psychedelics. There's something different about this time. If you're moderately interested about it, there's just no reason for you not to fully experience enlightenment. Anyone can fully experience that. And then you can choose what you want to do with that.
Yeah, man. Seriously. I've said that before too. Like, there's something about, maybe we're biased because, you know, we're living in this time. Maybe, who knows? But like you said, if you analyze the past and you study the past, you could see that this time is not like any other time. At least from what we have in recorded history. This time does seem like culmination of all of those past lifetimes, all of the past karma. And it seems like it's to lead up to this one. There's something special about this. Like I said, maybe we're a little biased because we're currently in this moment, living this time. But there is something novel about this. Like you said, we can, with the internet, there's no bounds. There's really no bounds. Most of my background, you asked about this before, right? To sum it up, most of my background is from the internet. You know, I don't have a guru per se. I don't have people in my personal life that I could go and approach with questions. All of my yogic knowledge is from the internet mostly. It's all of my teachings, I guess, that anything, pretty much anything, just to sum up, that I've learned about the journey, about myself, is from the internet, from very select sources. I'm not saying like all of the internet
Not memes,
is valuable. Yeah, no. Even though there is a time and a place for memes, but what I'm trying to say is, if you use the internet and the technology that we have at our disposal effectively, then yes, you can become almost like a superhuman, man. You can become this kind of like you can become the saint in a way, or at least saint-like, or on the path to sainthood. There's something so special about this. We have so much at our disposal, man, and I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm glad you realized that, because there is something so special about this. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking a little too much about it, but I feel as though, and I imagine whoever's listening to this, and imagine you stated it, there is something very, very peculiar about this lifetime. And you know, you can do whatever you want, right? We have the free will to ignore the resources that we have at our disposal, or if you really want to, you can take advantage of it and be able to dive into saints of the past, all of the scriptures of the past, all of the techniques like Kriya Yoga of the past, and really use it to one's advantage, to getting back to the karma point, clear one's karma of all of these previous lifetimes. It seems like this lifetime is so pivotal to do that. Maybe, maybe not. It's up to all of us to be able to find that kind of magic of this lifetime within our lifetime here. But yeah, that's the switch, man. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think I might add to your point as well that I completely agree with you. And I think, again, it's important we don't fall into like egotism here. Yeah. But at the same time, I feel like you're perfectly right. But maybe this is like the start of the wave, or sometimes people call it like the bleeding edge of a knife. It still seems to me like it's less than 1% of people that are awakening. So it's still a wonderful thing, because I think millions of people are awakening, which is way more than was happening in the past.
Yeah.
But it also puts a responsibility, not a egotism, but I hope a responsibility on people, or they might feel that to some degree, to spread that love a bit slowly. Like me personally, I don't think I need to be so optimistic that in this lifetime of mine, the whole world is going to become enlightened. Maybe it takes 300 more years or so, but that's still like very soon in the grand scheme of things. So we ourselves personally don't need to become the next Messiah, but if we could bring 12 people if we could just nudge them towards an enlightenment, that's a lot
Yeah.
of people, 12 people in our lifetime. We don't need to make it like some grand egotistical mission or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just coming back to this point again of love, letting it animate us, and just trying to spread it somehow a little bit, because that way, I think it will happen. All of humanity will see this at some point. But that's what I hope.
Yeah, man.
Um, but we don't need to be too attached to that happening right now. Even for our own selves, just within us, it's already epic. And seeing it
Mm-hmm.
happen to other people around the world is epic. And if it's happening to thousands of people, there could be a tipping point that if enough people are really connected to the light, that can take power in the world instead of power being in, sort of random pockets everywhere. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, made sense, man. Um, and that's the thing, right? Once you kind of get on this wavelength, it just becomes natural, I feel like, in to be of that energy, that light, I guess you could say, and just spread it to others, it seems. And the more that one tries to do that, to try to become the Messiah, I hope I didn't come across as that way when I was going off in my
No,
spiel.
definitely not. It's just
All right.
always good to, I think, just
Yeah.
keep a little bit of just to remember a little bit.
Yeah, seriously,
Just
man.
for myself, I'm like that.
Yeah, seriously. And the one that more like tries to do that, like to say, to gets a spiritual ego, it seems like that's just completely counterintuitive, right? That you can smell the bullshit, right? Anytime someone tries to take the guru complex a little too seriously, it's just like, oh, that's just this you can sense the lack of authenticity in that
But
way.
sorry to chime in.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the reason it kind of makes me sad, I think that's the emotion, especially if you see someone that seems authentic and genuine at the start,
Mm,
and then it sneaks up on them, this like spiritual ego. And like you said, you can smell the bullshit, but um, it's almost like a funny metaphor. Sometimes you meet someone and their breath really stinks,
mm.
but they can't smell it. That's the
Yeah,
thing.
right. Well, that's a good one. Yeah, I like that. I like that. I'm gonna remember that one.
Yeah.
It's
So
true though.
that's just the thing. It makes me sad. So although I don't think it's a huge problem, it's just if I can help one person avoid that trap, I think it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. Mm. The best thing that we can do here to be of that love and light is to be of that love and light just to yourself. Just really just the best thing we can do to work on others is to work on yourself, and then the others just comes along with that. And the more you try to work on others, especially if it's for some kind of benefit to yourself, it's not going to work. Then you're not going to benefit others. You know what I mean? In that equation, you have to really just work on yourself. There's nobody else that's going to do it other than yourself. So that's really the best that we can do in going about this whole thing, this whole topic that we're talking about, as embodying this light and love and becoming the saint or the deva or whatever you want to talk about. It's when you try to do that and you try to portray yourself as that, it seems like that's just not the way at all. You just have to really do it for yourself, and it's not in a selfish way. It's like I don't know how to put it, man. I guess it's like you just be selfish, but also selfless in your selfish acts.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
you're getting too close to non-duality. Words are failing, but I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. It's it's the act without any kind of recompense toward the other person. But it's funny because when one does resonate at that level of love, I guess you could say, a compassionate being, it seems like almost obligatory to follow that path of selflessness. But yet, once we try to become selfless with a reward in mind, right? With a sort of kind of transactional value to it, then I think it becomes counterintuitive and it doesn't quite work as well. Like, it's almost like a true saint doesn't even recognize himself as a saint. A saint would never call himself a saint. Like, I feel like if Jesus were to come back, Jesus wouldn't even call himself Jesus, or any any deity for that matter. It's almost like you can't. It's like once you state it, or you make that like your shtick, it's kind of like it doesn't work per se. I hope I'm making sense here. It's like when you try, when you, it's like effortless is what I'm trying to say. Like this whole reorientation of one's being to becoming love and embodying love and becoming light, blah blah blah. It's really effortless. It's just like it's just you just flow. Like there's some kind of energy that just flows through one, and you just become that energy in a way without any kind of like, you don't try to get anything out of that. It's just like an embodiment, a true literally embodiment of this loving force. Yeah, getting into the non-duality territory, I guess.
I totally agree with you, though. Maybe we could agree on like just as a joke almost that people should be called the saint after they die, so that we just don't confuse things. While you're
Yeah,
living, there's no need for that label.
that's usually how it goes, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, that's another interesting. Well, that's an interesting difference between Jesus and the Buddha. Is Buddha was praised for many,
Mm,
many years, and Jesus was so harshly punished.
yeah,
Um,
interesting.
so we can expect both. It's about what's happening internally. You might get lots of, you might get recognized, or you might get metaphorically crucified. What's important is in here.
Yeah, it's true, man. Yeah, ultimately, all of that is just story. As long as you can use the story as a reminder to come back in here, that's really all that matters. All that matters is really just how can you come back into that sense of loving spirit. Firstly, on yourself. Firstly, love your being for all your ups and downs, twists and turns, everything that the human experience presents to you without clinging, without resistance, right? This is an ideal. Obviously, I know it's an ideal, but that seems like the essence is to love just whatever's happening in one's experience. And then from there, naturally, that love just spreads like a virus into the world, into others, effortlessly. It seems to be the essence. And all everything else, like the Jesus story, the Buddha story, it's great, but make sure just to use that as a reminder for oneself. It's just fingers pointing at the moon. Don't forget the moon that's inside of us. The moon. I don't even know if it's the right way to say it, but it's the sun and the moon. It's the light within all of us. Just that's the most important thing, man. That's the most
Maybe I
important
could
thing.
share a random thought related to what you're saying.
Please.
Is that these traditions, they're almost like a fishing hook in a way. Well, they're meant to awaken us or to get us interested. But then the deeper truth of it is always not captured by these symbolism and stories. I could just give like a small example that came to mind. Um, just naturally, I've always been interested in Hinduism, and I thought I'd go to India and experience that fully. And when I got there, I was really interested in the statues, the paintings, the temples, and all of that. And the people there are really into their spirituality. Like they've got a lot of bhakti. They're like so into it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but just over the weeks of meditating, I noticed that all of that fell away. Like it's nice, the symbolism, but you can just, once you capture the symbolism, that's never it. It's always
Mm-hmm.
like a restriction. And even words are like that, or anything you say is always a restriction.
Yeah.
And what I found on this India trip, just as a particular example, is I ended up meditating in a mountain because there's nothing to say there. There's no symbolism, no story. It just is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. It just is there. That's really what it's about. Just
But
coming
I
back.
think it's important to recognize that we're not always there. So it's nice to have some sort of stories or techniques or words to just bridge the gap a little bit. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the point of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're not always there, even though we are always there. We are always here. We just don't know it. It seems like there's, mm, I know in the non-dual sense, like when I talk to non-dual people, they would always say, "Well, you are always there, no matter what." And but it's like, yeah, what you said, it's like but we're not really. There's another part of us that just gets lost. We get lost in the symbols and the phenomena and the subject object orientation of our language and everything that comes along with that. I don't know, man.
Yes. Well, I think spiritual teachers are interesting. I appreciate it when they can understand the context that we're talking about,
Yeah,
because in an absolute sense, and I shouldn't criticize, in an absolute sense, non-duality is correct.
yeah.
And I suppose some teachers, they refuse to come out of non-duality. So anything you say, they'll
Mm,
remind you of non-duality.
mm-hmm.
But then at other times, it's good to recognize the context of like the duality. And anyone who's living life, I think it's fine. It's sort of seeing through the duality
Yeah,
rather than totally forsaking it. Like if you're driving a car, you need to understand that I'm here and I can crash. Duality is not a bad thing. Um, so yeah, I think it's good that maybe you could play that as a game to traverse as often as possible, go full non-duality back to full duality, and just flip flop all the time, just so that we can become comfortable with both and become comfortable with the transition of both.
yeah,
If that makes
exactly,
any
man.
sense.
Yeah, man. I think that is non-duality at its truest sense, if one could describe it. It is a constant back and forth of perspective. And really, in that, the connection is love. Going back to it, man. I think love is the connection between those two seeming poles that one can experience. So you don't get too sucked into non duality, and you don't get too sucked into duality. If one can find the flow of love between the two, I see that almost as like the non-duality of non-duality, if that even makes sense. You know, it's this constant flow rather than one single state of non-duality, duality. It's really just like the Force in Star Wars. It's a continuing motion. It's a continual motion, right? It's the and one can find the moment that is here and now, me and you speaking, the listener in the future, the ever encompassing moment is just this love. There's no other way to put it. And I know those words definitely aren't doing it justice. But in that moment, like true non-duality is really that's it. It's just love. There's no other way to describe it. Even non-duality doesn't describe it. But another, I guess the closest synonym would be just this infinite love that connects the seemingly different phenomena of me and you. And in this, if one can really become aware of this moment, the here and now, one can find that love that connects me, you, and the listener through time and space. And in that, yes, there is no duality, there's no non-duality, there isn't even the concept of love. But if I'm trying to speak right now, because that's what we're doing, we're on a podcast, it's the only way that I can describe it is love. And there's other words for it, like agape. Uh, what's it in Sanskrit? What's love in Sanskrit, man? I forget.
Oh, I don't even know. I guess Ananda is similar,
Yeah,
but
there's
it's
yeah,
not the same.
there's other words, man. I'm thinking of prema. But like I said, the words don't even matter. The words don't really do it justice. But I think one can maybe grasp what I was trying to say. In the moment, in this moment, what connects us and allows us to transcend all phenomena, all coming and going, is just this force of love. And that's really all that I could describe it as. And it's beautiful, right? Isn't that beautiful? That love connects us. It's not fear, what the popular portrayal of our world might make you believe that fear is the basis of this um of this world, of this movie of life, but on the contrary is actually love behind the scenes. But if one can come in the moment, truly reside in the moment, it's not quite so behind the scenes as it seems. Yeah.
I think in a past life you were a poet for sure. You've got a very nice way of explaining things.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Two things came to mind just for interest. Maybe someone resonates with this. Because non-duality is such a paradoxical concept, something that can help me as well is to think of it a little bit in terms of geometry, or you can put it in a different way, sort of what you said. So I perceive this situation as there's me, there's you. That's a duality.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also bring in someone else, like, oh, there's the audience as well. So now that's like a trinity. Or you can have a trinity, me, others, God. So that's another way to think about it, is because dual means two, I believe. You can even think about it as non-trinity, or you can go 4 or 5. Think of 4 things. All of that is a non. It's sort of like a non-duality is like a line, me, you, and then you say, well, the line is not actually the true reality. But you can also draw a triangle and also realize that none of that triangle is really true. It's all mental concept.
Yeah.
Just a little thing I thought I might throw out. But coming back to the start of our conversation about psychedelics, I think that's what makes it so good, because that just makes all of this abundantly clear. Like you're saying, it's effortless. It just is. It simply is. And it's nice to actually be at such a place, because some people aren't. I'm not, definitely, like all the time right now. I understand what you're saying from memory, but it's not like as deeply true as it could be. If I took a big psychedelic, then it's just like undeniable, like we talked about earlier. So that's what's really nice about these psychedelics, is they make it so abundantly clear that that there's no need for any of these word games.
Exactly.
But the word games are fun. They're not bad either.
They're fun, man. They are fun. I mean, yeah, that's what I can come to the conclusion of when I do these talks with people, is that it seems just like we're playing a game. We're kind of just like we're kind of just having some fun in the moment here. I know there's definitely a little more seriousness to it, but really what we're doing is just playing this almost tennis match of words. I serve it to you, you serve it back to me, and we're just going back and forth, almost creating this one mind. And that is almost a trinity in itself as well. Like we have this one mind in between me and you, back and forth, this one kind of like transforming thought form that just lingers between my brain and your brain, and it goes back and forth through this technology that we have. It's kind of trippy to think about, but ultimately it is some kind of game, because any word that you could say or I could say doesn't do the truth, quote unquote, with a capital T, doesn't do it justice. It really doesn't, man. But
Just to mention again, that's why I really like the goddess Durga. I think that's why she's my favorite, is whenever I hear her name, that's what I think about, that which is beyond whatever you've just collected for yourself. It's always beyond that. Unfortunately, it just seems like words always capture something. They don't open. Well, that's the idea. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to open everything. We're not trying to encapsulate, which is interesting. The word non-dual, that's sort of the word we keep using. Even it's almost like a negative word, right? We're saying it's not dual.
yeah.
We can't even come up with, we don't want to capture anything. We want to release everything. So it's like, it's non-dual, it's non-trinity, it's non-selfish, it's non-selflessness, it's non-everything, it's not unencapsulating.
Yeah, if you read the suttas, if you read some, the classical Buddhist text, you can realize that all of their, I'm not good with Pali, but a lot of their Pali ideas are like that. They don't encapsulate anything. They speak in the negative about things to prevent any kind of conceptualization around it. Even though it's the non-conceptualization is a conceptualization, it's better than creating a conceptualization from said word. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the essence of Buddhist teachings. If one wants to go down that route, it's interesting. It's all negative, but not negative as in like the way that we see negative. Like it's not like what other attributes do we associate with negative in our world? Like just pain. It's not like
Yeah, I guess like failure or
bad.
something.
Yeah, it's not
No.
bad per se. It's negative as in like you said, it doesn't constrict our mind. And that's the essence of Zen Buddhism as well, too. That's kind of like that's Buddhism in another light. They even just go beyond like they go beyond even I don't even know. Zen Buddhism and the koans with Zen is it does a very good job of non-encapsulating anything. Like your mind, there's no endpoint in Zen koans. You know what I mean? There's no happy ending to a Zen koan. There's no like everything comes together. I think that's the point of Buddhism altogether. Is that it's like it's the whole how do I put this? It's like it's a conglomeration of insights that really lead to the disattachment from insights, if that makes sense. The unattachment of insights. Really, when one can examine Buddhism, it's like there is a specialty behind the way that it's taught from a very from a renowned master or teacher. Like there's a knack and nuances to the way that it's taught, to really make it so that we don't get attached to the finger pointing at the moon, kind of like the subject of this whole conversation. So that's why I have an affinity to Buddhism. Same with you. Do you? I think I've seen some things that you have an affinity to Buddhism. Is that kind of like is that what attracts you to Buddhism? Is that kind of like it is negative in the way that it speaks? It makes it so it is non-dual. Like really, non-duality is Buddhism in a way. The Buddha was the original and the ultimate non-dualist, if you really want to go down that route. So is that what do you take an affinity to Buddhism because of that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Buddhism. Yeah, and what's inspiring to me as well about Buddhism is that it was like it's very clearly a man that attained.
Yeah, that's what they
Whereas
made it.
Hinduism, I love Hinduism, but that's usually about the gods, whereas Buddhism
Yeah.
is like what a particular person did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that makes it achievable for any of us. But yeah, something that came to mind as well, and I was thinking maybe I shouldn't share it because I can't remember the details too precisely, but I'll just give it the gist of it.
Okay.
I think it's from the Mahayana Buddhist tradition. When they celebrate their new year, the monks, what they do is they all sit in a hall and they chant a particular book. I think it's quite a thick book. It takes like all night to chant it. But all this book is it's a huge list of things which they say is empty. So they might say something like, "My bed is empty, my couch is empty," but then they'll also say, "Going to the grocery store is empty, the sun is empty, the moon is empty." Then also say, "Buddha is empty,
Yeah.
enlightenment is empty, love is empty, hate is empty, my guitar is empty." And
Mm-hmm.
they just do this for like the whole night. Um, I've never done that. Maybe I would like to do that one day. But that's, I think, goes to the point you were saying. Um, it's just constantly reminding ourselves like everything is empty, 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 empty.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So that sort of approach to Buddhism, I really do appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Buddhism is so universal. I would encourage anyone, if it resonates with them. I think if you're a Hindu or a Christian, it's just helpful to have Buddhism as a background knowledge almost.
Yeah.
Just it supports whatever you're doing in spirituality, or
Mm-hmm.
you can go fully down the track of Buddhism. And there's actually quite a lot of variety as well in Buddhism. So whatever you
Mm-hmm.
like, you can find there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Buddhism is like a very solid foundation, I feel like, for examining your being. And
Especially Vipassana, I'll just quickly say, if
oh
for
yeah.
some reason a beginner is listening to this, someone that doesn't know much about Buddhism, I would suggest start with Vipassana
Mm-hmm.
or Zen.
Yeah. Really just simple anapanasati too, just the fact of breathing, doing like a 10 count breath. the basis of that, that's really all you need. If you really don't want to read any suttas or listen to any monk talk, just look up anapanasati breathing. If that's really all that you get from Buddhism, I believe that's all you need. Just a simple following the breath. You can learn more about yourself or non-self with just following the breath with discipline, consistently, earnestly, than you ever would from reading any text or listening to any kind of sermon. I don't know if that's what they call them, sermons from a monk, a teacher. What do they call a teaching in Buddhism? I don't
I think
know.
they might just call it a talk. That's what I usually hear it
Yeah,
as.
yeah, right. They don't want to fluff it up too much. So yeah, you'll get more just
Dharma.
from
You're
the
probably
breath.
talking about Dharma, the
Yeah,
Dharma
yeah,
talk.
Dhamma talk. Yeah, exactly. You'll get more just from doing the simple practice of anapanasati, I believe. I was gonna make a point, but I completely forgot. Oh yeah, um, that's the thing, is it's a good foundation for me. Like the Buddhist, I look at it as almost like a strategy guide to my being. I can always resort back to the Buddhist, the five aggregates, like the Buddhist like kind of explanation of the human existence at a very like um at a level that is just like unrelentlessly, it's just so real. I don't know how to explain it. It's just so like in your face. I don't know how else to explain it. There's probably other people that can put it a little more eloquently, but there's just like, it's just so like but then there's contradictions because in my being, sometimes in my studies, in my self studies, like it'll say, I just read a passage of, I think it's anatta, with no soul, and they disregard the idea of atman or any kind of god or deity, right? Like it doesn't hold any weight or value in Buddhism, understandably so, because that's what makes Buddhism so great, is it's like almost like an opposite to that. I can see like the opposite side to it and I can see the validity in that viewpoint as well. So I think for me, my personal journey, and we can get into yours, is like weighing Buddhism, the unrelenting realism of Buddhism, with this kind of ideas of deity and Brahman and Atman and universal consciousness, and the really the magic and the mystery and the divinity of the human experience, right? The story of our evolution, right? The fluff talk that we've talked about, right? Weighing that with Buddhism, I feel like is a good balance. So I don't know. Sometimes I see it as a balance. Sometimes I see it as contradiction. So it's like I go back and forth. Like I wouldn't ever become a Swami because I revere Buddhism, but I also wouldn't ever become a Theravada monk because I revere the yogic teachings so much as well. I'm like somewhere, and I'm also like a Christian. I would refer to myself as a Christian. I feel like I'm a hodgepodge of all of these belief systems. Like my path seems to be like finding out the truth in all of these, right? I dive in and I take a little bit from this. I leave a little bit that I don't like from certain other belief systems, whatever it is, whatever teaching it is. I take what I need and leave what I don't. Um, so I find out my path is like there's a lot of contradictions, but I also find that there's a lot of similarities between all of these kind of practices, modalities, and ways of life that people have exposed to us over the years. Do you feel the same? Like, do you feel like sometimes there's contradictions in things that you read, but then do you feel that there's a lot of similarities as well? And your job is to kind of weigh that truth, that capital T truth inside of yourself.
Yeah, I can totally resonate with what you're saying. Maybe what came to my mind was that Buddhism is sort of like the word you used is unrelenting. It's sort of
Yeah.
like an unrelenting arrow.
Mm.
I actually have an arrow behind the camera. It's kind of funny over there. But that's good to know or to have a direction. If you're sort of confused in which direction to go, Buddhism is always piercing in the
Yeah.
correct direction. But sometimes it can feel a little bit dry, which I think is also why Buddhists, they really emphasize discipline, basically, like keep doing it, even though it doesn't seem always exciting. Whereas something like Hinduism, it's more romantic.
Yeah.
They make it exciting. And in Hinduism, bhakti is a Sanskrit word word which means sort of like devotion, or like you can even cry because you're so in love with the god. Yeah, it's more romantic, more energizing. It makes you want to do the spirituality. But then
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, you can get caught up in, yeah, you can get caught up in all this excitement, whereas Buddhism
Yeah.
is more piercing. So it can be good to combine both of them. And yeah, again, to throw in a little bit of Jesus, I think one of his famous quotes is, you yourself need to separate the wheat from the chaff. So the chaff is like the waste product, and you need to get what's important.
Mm.
And you or I need to do that. It's not like you can have someone else do that for you.
Mm-hmm.
And all these traditions, they're so old. Even Buddhism, I think Buddhism has done a fantastic job in staying pure, you can say, not getting too distracted. But there are Buddhist terrorists, some places in the world. Any tradition can have some traps or like miss things. I think it's good to refuse to be encapsulated. If any like religion tells you that you need to stay with us only, then they are like almost by default incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
The truth isn't afraid of looking left and looking right. Truth is universal everywhere.
Mm.
So the more we can deeply compare and see the similarities, I think that's where the truth lies. That's the most accurate place to find it, is in all the places, seeing what's common. And again, the internet's what makes this, I think, possible.
Yeah.
In India, you could have Buddhism and Hinduism easily, but yeah, we can literally compare all the types of Buddhism, all the aspects of Hinduism, Sikhism, Zoroastrianism, Islam,
Any ism.
animism. We can just go crazy and find what is universal.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's our job here, man. What is universal? I like that. That's our job. And nobody's gonna do it for you. I think we already mentioned this, but that's the thing is like you can go down whatever ism you want to go down, but ultimately, yeah, you have to do it yourself.
Just a random thought that came to mind. It's tying
Mm-hmm.
back to something you said earlier. But there's a yogi I like. He has something he likes to say. He's like a famous phrase. But I should mention, or sadhana is a Sanskrit word again. Sadhana means practice, like sitting down, meditating, or doing whatever you're doing spiritually, but like actually doing it, like daily,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
doing mantras or chanting or vipassana, anything. But what he would say is the sadhana, the practice, it doesn't make you enlightened or awakened. It makes you the type of person that becomes enlightened. So we're putting in all this effort, we're actually doing it, we're separating the wheat from the chaff. But then when actually we see it, see non-duality, it's effortless. It's totally effortless. There's no logical inferation that I finally figured it out. I finally found the
Mm-hmm.
commonality.
Mm-hmm.
It just is. And then it sort of clicks. Then it makes sense that now I can see what everything was trying to get at. And in that
Yeah.
moment, it's effortless.
It's almost ironic in that moment, right?
Yeah, totally ironic. Makes you
Mm-hmm.
feel like, why did I even bother thinking so much? But
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, you kind of, I'll give you another random metaphor that I liked. I heard someone tell me, but in Hinduism, they have a god called Krishna, and Krishna plays a flute. So when Krishna's playing the flute, you're the flute. A flute, of course, is just empty. It's just emptiness. But when Krishna plays you, it's like a dance, totally effortless. It's just great fun. You're full of love. But also, what is a flute? Well, Krishna's flute is made from bamboo.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be Krishna's flute, you need to go through the process. You need to,
Oh.
sort of just, this is just a vague metaphor, but, you need to chop it to the correct length. You need to empty it out. You need to drill the holes. You maybe need to fine tune it, polish it. There's something we need to do to become God's instrument.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
when we are, it's just totally effortless. Nothing, no logic, no, no work. It's just, the best thing ever.
Yeah. Just play the music. You become the music. Yeah, man. We are the music. We're the music of the moment. That's a really good metaphor. I like that. I never really understood that why Krishna was playing the flute. you just brought that to light for me. That's good, man.
One interpretation at least.
I like it. I don't know if that's the real interpretation, but it's real to me. I like that a lot. Wow, man. Whew. This is a good one. This is a good talk. I really like this one. You're a real one, man. Yeah, I don't think I have really anything else to say or ask. So, my last question usually to people is, do you have any last words for the podcast? Anything you want to get off your chest? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, I'll say something, but I'll sound like a broken record, or maybe we'll just finish how we started. You're in America, I presume, right? From your
Mm-hmm.
time zone and
Yep.
from your accent.
Yep.
I think it's the 13th where you are, but here it's already Valentine's Day. So I'll
Mhm.
just send everyone a beautiful Valentine's loving wish. I'll send love your way since that's the day.
Beautiful, man. Yeah. Yeah, very fitting. It's yeah, not yet Valentine's Day here, but I guess you live in the future, so it already is Valentine's
Yeah,
Day.
it's magic. Don't worry about the logic.
Appreciate that, man. Appreciate that love. Definitely felt the love in the convo. I hope everybody else did that listened to it. Man, yeah, this is a good talk. We just gotta become the instrument, man. You just I don't even know what to say. I don't know. I'm at a loss for words. I was gonna try and come up with some kind of magical metaphor to end this thing, but there's nothing else left to say. I appreciate your time, wisdom, effort, and energy that you brought to this moment. Um, yeah, I'll link all of your stuff in the description, man. I appreciate you. Keep doing your thing. And you know how I know you're a real yogi? You sat in lotus posture for over an hour and a half. You barely even you don't have a backrest, right? You don't have a backrest.
No, not here.
Yeah, you're real, man. That's real. Most people can't do that. Most people can't sit like that without, going in like different, poses or having a backrest or having a rest. So that's respect just being able to do that. So I bow to that in you, man. But yeah, I thank you for your time, wisdom, and effort.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for having me. We'll have another conversation sometime, I hope.
For sure, man. For sure. Keep doing your thing, Gerhardt. The Gary and Gerhardt podcast, part 2 coming soon. Thanks, man.
See you next
Peace.
time.